Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to watch this Team 22 demo on Jira Align. My name is Jacques van den Berg, and I'm an Enterprise Solutions Architect here at Atlassian. Today, we'll be looking at how we can use Jira Align to drive enterprise agility with strategic portfolio management. But before we get into today's demo, I'd like to quickly touch base on a key challenge that most senior leaders seem to face today. And that is around how to effectively bridge the gap between strategy formulation and execution. We often hear them ask questions like, hey, are we doing the right things, or what are the right things we should be doing? And are we doing enough of the right things at the right time? And are these so-called right things that we're doing delivering the expected value? Now, strategic portfolio management is a critical capability that enables the organization to answer these questions through essentially three key building blocks. Strategic alignment, which looks at how you realize your strategy by aligning your teams to the strategic goals. Strategic planning, which includes the quantification and prioritization of your change ambition and aligning this to your actual change capacity. And value-driven, which places the emphasis on objectively measuring the portfolio's impact, not in terms of outputs delivered, but outcomes achieved. So in today's demo, we're going to look at how Jira Align can support your strategic portfolio management capabilities by looking at the strategy room and how we can set strategic direction and intent from there, how we can mobilize teams around the strategy through funding various development streams, how we can set the investment guardrails to guide the teams in identifying new investment opportunities, how we can visualize a strategic roadmap of these investment opportunities, and we'll wrap things up by looking at how we can use Jira Align's objective tree to shift the conversation from tracking progress in terms of output, but towards tracking it in terms of outcomes achieved. So let's jump into Jira Align to see how all of this can be done. Okay, so we'll start off today's demo by looking at the strategy that's already been defined for this fiscal period. To do this, we're going to navigate into the strategy room that's in the enterprise level, and we'll set our time horizon to this strategic fiscal period, which is our corporate strategy for 2022. So luckily, we've had a strategy team that's been hard at work, and they've already created our mission, vision, and values for the organization that guided them in formulating the strategy that we're about to look at. Now, below this mission, vision, and values part, we can see the strategy pyramid. It's clear to see in the strategy pyramid that we've defined two core strategic levels, namely the core long-term strategies part, which is how we'll succeed by 2025, and our annual goals, which is what we want to do this year in terms of those long-term strategies. Now, side note here, we could configure up to 4 levels of these core strategic levels, but it seems that for us, we can create sufficient strategic runway by just using these 2 levels. Now, the great part about this strategy pyramid is that it gives you unique insight into how into the relationship between our enterprise level cross-cutting strategies and the annual goals that they're decomposed of, as well as the outcomes hierarchy that rolls up into these. But you're also able to see the alignment of all of this into your outputs by looking at how your work hierarchy lines up into your objectives and long-term strategies. Now, below the OKR, below this, we can find the OKR heat map. Now, the OKR heat map shows us your OKR scores rolled up across every level of the organization to give you a quick pulse check of the objective health, as well as the percentage of progress made on these key results across all of your strategic goals and your objectives that have been defined for the organization. Now, if we wanted to understand the progress on these key strategies and objectives even deeper, we could scroll down to our strategy room's OKR tree to see all of the long-term strategies and annual goals that have been defined across this fiscal period. Now, here we can start looking at how these long-term strategies are decomposed into annual goals, through to portfolio objectives, and all the way down to team level objectives. Now, we're going to pause here for a moment because we can see that here for our organization, we've prioritized our long-term strategy to move towards a digital experience where 90% of our transactions are performed through digital channels by 2025. For this fiscal period, we've decomposed that into increasing our number of mobile transactions by 100% year over year. And further to that, we've actually decomposed it into portfolio objectives, program or development value stream objectives, and even team level objectives. So you can really see how the strategy room allows you to get a quick indication of the progress of your strategies, goals, objectives, as well as the work that's planned over the fiscal period in one consolidated view. So this is a great start, but how do we mobilize our teams in the first place to start executing against all of the objectives in the strategy room? Well, in order to do this, we need to fund long-running stable teams that work towards a common objective. So let's hop over to Jira Align's funding plan to see how this can be done. So here in the funding plan view, we're again going to focus on our corporate strategy for 2022. It's worth mentioning here that Jira Align's funding model is really anchored around our development value streams. Now, whether these are product areas or tribes or agile release trains in your organization, it really boils down to the ability to fund your teams of teams that are working towards a common objective. Now, for our organization, Mainstream Financial, we've decided that given the importance of shifting almost all of our transactions into a digital channel by 2025, that we'd like to fund a digital services portfolio. And this portfolio will be made up of a number of programs or development value streams that will be focused on achieving that specific strategic goal. So here, the portfolio has been funded to the tune of $50 million for this selected fiscal period. And we've distributed this funding across the upcoming quarters in this fiscal period. We've also allocated for each of these quarters a portion of that funding to each of the development value streams or programs themselves, and you can see how that funding has been set here. What's interesting to note here is that you can actually see how the business is intending to ratchet up investment in the digital services portfolio over the coming quarters, as we can see the accrual happening over the coming quarters. The beauty of this plan, though, however, is that it doesn't only set the funding, but it can also track the cumulative burn rate for teams as the work unfolds. So here we can see how the team costs are rolling up into specific team programs or development value streams. Now, Jira Align does the heavy lifting for you here, but to put it simply, it looks at the allocation of team members, either full-time or part-time, across these teams, across specific time box periods, multiplies their allocation by the rates, and aggregates that up to give you a burn rate. So what's great about this view is we'll be able to quickly identify areas where we're either underspending, like here in mobile and web, or areas where we're overspending, like here in shared services. And from here, we're able to quickly deep dive into the specific teams to try and find the root cause for why this might be happening. So here we can see we've got a medias team. They have 5 full-time members that we think is part of this team, and we can jump into the specific time boxes that this team is delivering on. We're going to jump into Sprint 23 here to see what's happened over that specific time box. And if we look at who were the team members for that specific period of time, we can see that, oh, okay, there's actually many more people that were part of this team for that specific period. So it would seem that in order for this team to meet its objectives, they're actually looking for a different type of skill set to be able to meet the team's objectives that have been set, which is also telling because, this is the first time we're actually seeing the skills deficit and the financial impact of that across your portfolio. So now that we have a funding plan in place, the next step would be to set the guardrails that allows the teams to actually execute autonomously, but within the boundaries that still ensure strategic alignment. In Jira Align, this can be done by our investment themes. So we're going to hop over to investment versus spend screen to see how this can be done. Right, so again, here in the investment versus spend view, we're going to focus on the 2022 corporate strategy. Now, before we dive into the pie charts we're going to see on the screen here, I'd like to draw your attention to the investment themes that our portfolio team have defined for us here at the bottom. I'm hoping that these start to look familiar because they should, in essence, be very much tied to or be the embodiment of the strategies that we saw in the strategy room a bit earlier. We can think of these investment themes as that connective tissue between the strategic intent, the strategies we saw, and the investment opportunities in the form of portfolio epics and initiatives that we'll invest in later on. This specific theme here, for instance, the Deliver Mobile First investment theme. This is the embodiment of our annual goal, which is to increase the number of mobile banking transactions by 100% year over year, and which also in turn has been tied to performing 90% of our transactions digitally by 2025. But you can also see that the portfolio team have created a good mix between growth transformation aspirations and running the day-to-day operations of the business through the creation of more evergreen type investment themes like the ongoing operation activities, keeping the lights on investment theme here, as well as some infrastructure and architecture investment that we foresee in the future. So this view is really that intersecting point where we can start to see the same 50 million in funding that we've allocated to the teams being earmarked across really thematic investment opportunities that have been distilled from our strategic goals. Now, this is a really, really big leap that can be taken to move us from a command and control type portfolio operation towards one where autonomy and strategic alignment really coexist. So let's look at how we've actually set up the investment themes or allocated our funding across our investment themes. I'm going to jump into this set investment theme guardrail view here. And here we can see that for this strategic snapshot, we've allocated a large portion of our funding towards delivering on our mobile first strategy. So we can also see in this view here, you have the ability to either dial up or dial down your investments in certain areas across the coming quarters to meet your strategic intent. So jumping back to our investment versus spend report, you can see that the investment themes that we've set in the previous screen are all embodied here in this first pie chart that we see here. Here we can see that 30% investment funding that we've set for our mobile first strategy. But apart from that, we're also able to track how we're executing against these guardrails through an estimated spend and an accepted spend. Here in the middle, we can see the estimated spend graph, and this pie chart here is actually calculated by looking at the forecasted effort across your feature level estimates and converting that into a monetary value. The accepted spend reflects the accepted spend for aggregate effort across all of the accepted stories that roll up into these themes. And again here, Jira Align does the heavy lifting for you by turning your team level estimates into financial spend values through its effort estimation conversion model. So this allows your teams to refine their agile estimation instead of building heavy cost plans, right? So the driving principle here is we'd like to give your portfolio leaders a quick economic view to make those right prioritization calls with roughly right information instead of precisely wrong information. So a couple of things on this report stand out for me, and I'd like to draw your attention to one in specific. So here we can see we're planning on investing heavily in AI and blockchain technologies, and there's also a large chunk of strategically misaligned work which aren't mapped to any of the investment themes. And it seems like these are at the expense of delivering on our mobile first strategy. But we can also see that the teams seem to be working on a lot of stories that are not thematically correct or aligned, and they're also spending a lot more on ongoing operational activities than we anticipated. So it looks like we'll need to do some reprioritization calls on the initiatives that have been approved into the system to make sure there's greater strategic alignment across this portfolio. So what better way to do that by just jumping straight into the portfolio backlog to see actually how these initiatives have been prioritized. So in Jira Align's portfolio backlog, this is a great place to get that single source of truth for all of the prioritized initiatives that have been planned across the entire portfolio. But we're going to have a look at specifically what investment opportunities have been planned for the mobile and web development value stream for this ongoing quarter. So let's look at mobile and web. I'll set our context to mobile and web, and we'll look at this current quarterly increment, which is 2022 Q1. And we'll look at all of the initiatives that have been planned for them to either work on here. So we can see they're currently working on 52 initiatives. And I'm also going to have a look at how these initiatives are parented up into our themes. So here we get our first glimpse at potentially why we're seeing such a misalignment between our investment guardrails and what the team's actually forecasting to do and how they're actually doing it. We can see a lot of operationalized AI and blockchain technology themes at the top of the portfolio backlog for this program, for this mobile and web program. Now, this is an easy fix in Jira Align because we can just pull the rank from our investment theme ranking backlog, which has already been set by our strategy team. So by pulling the rank here and applying this rank, we can see that, it takes all of our initiatives and stack ranks them according to the strategic priorities that have already been created. So now we've got all of our deliver mobile first initiatives right at the top, which will provide a better strategic alignment when the teams start prioritizing work in the coming quarters. This also allows us an opportunity from here to make some micro adjustments in our priorities if we wanted to do that. The other thing that we're seeing on this view as well is we can see how these initiatives are scheduled and targeted across various upcoming quarters. Now, I want to shift our gears a bit and take us towards how we can actually visualize these upcoming quarters. Now, granted, we're not going to get into this today, and we're going to trust that our teams have gone through the rigor of applying our portfolio Kanban policies to get us to this point. We've actually planned the initiatives, but if you want to, feel free to check out some of our demos that shows how Jira Align can help your lean portfolio management activities to run a successful intake and demand management process. For now, I'm just going to skip ahead and get directly into our roadmaps view in Jira Align. So here in our roadmap view, I want to update my context to get an indication of our planning from a now, next, later perspective. So I'm going to select our current in progress quarterly increment, the quarterly increment to follow, and the one after that. So we're going to have a look at a 3-quarter view ahead. And the road mapping capability in Jira Align is extremely powerful, and there's a lot of slicing, dicing, and grouping that you can use to create various different viewpoints. But we're going to focus on our initiatives by investment grouping today. So here we can again see how our investment themes have been set and prioritized, and we can see under each of these investment themes, the initiatives that we're planning on delivering, planning on executing to deliver towards those investment themes that are tied towards our strategies. But again, here, we can take a step further. We can actually look at how these specific initiatives that we have prioritized actually tie into the portfolio objectives that have been set by the organization. So I'm going to go ahead and group these objectives group these initiatives by an objective view, and we'll see specifically which objectives they relate to. So now we can see that there's a number of initiatives that we're executing that will help us to achieve this portfolio objective here of becoming the most downloaded financial services app in the marketplaces. It may or may not be that some of these initiatives contribute to multiple portfolio objectives, but I think the most telling part about this view here is that we're starting to see visibility of a lot of portfolio initiatives that aren't aligned to any objectives. So this opens up the conversations to whether we should continue investing in these or not. And I think that's one of the great benefits of Jira Align's strategic road mapping capability. Now, the road mapping capability isn't just strategic. It's also very powerful because it sits on top of your team tools, right? So Jira Align is integrated with whatever team tools you have, Jira or any other. And as teams start executing their work in the team tools, we'll be able to, in near real time, reflect that data in Jira Align. An example of that is, I'm just going to switch to our feature by initiative view here, and we'll just look at this mobile banking iPhone app here. In this initiative, we can see how we're planning to deliver on a number of features, but there's also stories coming through from the team tools And what's best about this is we can also start to see any critical issues that may arise. For instance, this feature here, we're anticipating some rollover since there's already work being planned in the upcoming quarter by the teams. So we'll probably need to take some decisions around what we do with this feature at this quarterly checkpoint here. So it's a great place where we can start seeing the execution against the plan, and with all of the features and stories living in Jira Align, your portfolio and program teams can use not only this view, but many other views to track the execution against these plans. Some of them are program rooms, incremental progress reports, predictability reports, and even big room planning dashboards. But for today's demo, I actually want to circle back to a more granular view on not tracking the execution against a roadmap, but more against our outcomes. So to do that, we're actually going to jump into Jira Align's objective tree. Now, the objective tree is essentially a central space where you're able to quickly determine the status and progress of your objectives across all levels, whether it's portfolio, program, or even team level. And as teams across the organization start capturing their progress against their key results, that then calculate the objective score, which ultimately informs the objective status, the portfolio managers and the program managers and the team leaders across the organization can really get a quick overview of which objectives are at risk and which ones are off track. So it's really that single place where you can start to see items worth discussing. What's great about this is you can also see how the work is tied into these objectives. So here we can see the visibility of work progress tied to objective, and we can understand the effort spent in achieving the work, the key results that we've set for this specific objective. So it puts all of this information in a single page and makes course correction conversations happen a lot faster because you're able to roll up all of the most pressing issues. So this view is really a must-have for teams that want to shift their conversations from tracking progress of work to tracking progress of outcomes. Now, Jira Align is an extremely feature-rich solution, and there's so much more that we can dig into. But for now, we'll wrap this up. I hope you enjoyed this quick run-through of Jira Align and how it can help you connect your organization's strategy to execution with some simple strategic portfolio management principles. That's it from me. Bye for now.